The Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum is located at Pier 86 on 46th Street on the Hudson River in Manhattan, and it is essentially the premier aeronautical museum in New York City, housed within a decommissioned aircraft carrier. As of 2021, during the COVID reopening period, tickets are $33, $31 for seniors, and $24 for children 5 to 12 years of age. The museum grounds include multiple decks of the aircraft carrier and the pier at which it is moored. We're going to start out on the Hangar Deck, which resembles many great museums of natural history and science. And the Hangar Deck contains exhibits covering the ship's past, as well as some classic carrier aircraft and interactive aviation exhibits for children. There are dioramas that tell the story of the USS Intrepid, which was an Essex-class carrier constructed during World War II. And during the World War II era, she served in the Pacific Theater, including some massive naval battles near the Philippines. The ship was commissioned in August of 1943, but this bell was actually part of her decommissioning ceremony in 1974. After World War II, the Intrepid continued serving in Vietnam and in a Cold War-era anti-submarine warfare capacity. It also supported splashdown recovery operations for NASA manned spaceflight missions. This TBM-3E Avenger was a torpedo bomber that performed marvelously in World War II and was responsible for the sinking of some of Japan's largest naval ships, including the Yamato and the Musashi. Late President George H.W. Bush was a famous Avenger pilot. Now, this is a FJ-3 Fury from North American Aviation, which also built the P-51 Mustang. This is among the several folding wing carrier aircraft on display, and it was pivotal in NATO activities throughout the 1950s. And as we continue through our journey on the Intrepid's history, we visit the A-4B Skyhawk from Douglas Aircraft, which has an unusually small 8.4 meter wingspan, addressing the same requirements as folding wing fighters. This particular Skyhawk flew missions with the Intrepid during the Vietnam War. Towards the back of the hangar deck, you'll find an interactive exhibit space ideal for visiting families called the Explorium. This is a submarine exhibit staffed by real active duty Marines. Perfect recruiting opportunity for our armed forces. There's also a virtual reality 4D ride, which I did not experience on this visit, but that looks quite thrilling. You can also step into the cockpit of an A-6E Intruder, which was a Cold War era bomber. I wish the instruments were real, but the illustrated cockpit is just fine. And as we see behind us, clearly the aircraft shell is quite genuine. There's some sort of space shuttle simulator. I didn't examine it that closely, but I'm sure it would be of interest to visitors of all ages. One of the doors off the hangar deck leads to the restored pilot escalator, which was used to transport Navy pilots to the flight deck. And it's not working at the moment, but you can walk up and experience what those pilots did in their heyday. Speaking of the flight deck, that is where the majority of the aircraft can be found, and boy, are there a lot of them. Some of the key ones include the A-6E Intruder, a MiG-17, an F-11 Tiger, painted in Blue Angels livery, an F-8 Crusader, and F-9 Cougar, the F-4 Phantom II, a Harrier jet, a F-14 Super Tomcat, a Sikorsky Chickasaw, an E-1B Tracer, an A-12, and a T-38 Talon. And they are scattered throughout the deck. Each one of them has a little placard that gives you more information about each. Now, the F-11F Tiger, painted in Blue Angels livery, served with the Angels in the 60s. These days, they fly FA-18 Super Hornets, and the Blue Angels number their fleet 1 through 6, and this specific plane flew as Blue Angel number 5 from 1961 to 63. The F-14 Tomcat spent nearly 40 years as the Navy's premier fighter and was, of course, immortalized in the classic Tom Cruise film Top Gun. This aircraft was designed specifically to carry and efficiently deliver those AIM-54 radar-guided missiles. And also on the top deck of the carrier is a pavilion housing the Space Shuttle Enterprise, the first space shuttle manufactured when the program began its prototyping phase in the 1970s. You proceed down that tunnel, and then the Enterprise appears in all its space-conquering glory. Now, the Enterprise was actually just a test vehicle. It was not spaceworthy, lacking the heat shields necessary to survive re-entry. Back outside on the pier sits the world-famous supersonic Concorde, and this particular specimen set the world speed record for passenger flight in 1996, flying the New York to London route in 2 hours, 52 minutes, and 59 seconds, a record that still stands today. And even on this cold, rainy May day, the pier offers impressive views of Manhattan. You can also enter some of the more restrictive spaces within the ship that were integral to its day-to-day operations. Just be prepared to do some climbing on these very steep original steps. And eventually, after climbing a few stories, you will reach the navigation bridge, which includes the chart house, a sort of map room used for navigation. Then you'll ultimately, after you view these communication devices and other navigational aids within the chart house, you will reach the captain's cabin, which included a bed and a desk. Relatively simple.
On the gyro compasses, there were 2, plus a magnetic compass, 4 engine RPM gauges, wind speed and direction, ship speed, plotting board, that was from World War II during the Battle of Leyte Gulf. That would tell the captain where everybody else was. There's a radar scope up there, and then there's other equipment outside. The original wall of the ship is this wall you see with the portholes in it. In the 50s, they expanded it and put that outer wall there.
Really?
They just kept the inner wall here, so they just decided they wanted to make it bigger.
Interesting.
There are just so many spaces to explore. There you see the captain's chair. A rotating set of veterans who actually crewed vessels like this one now volunteer as docents, and I highly recommend you interacting with them during your visit. There's one now. You can and should take an elevator down to the mess deck, and as you can imagine, the space allocated to both preparing and consuming food is quite extensive. Sometimes we forget about the thousands of servicemen and women who devote their lives to feeding their fellow soldiers, but we are reminded of them through many first-hand accounts provided in this exhibit. And I believe these are bunks for the enlisted. On this particular day, as we head towards the Concorde, there were a couple of Humvees parked on the pier with motors running, and they appeared to be staffed by some active duty servicemen. The Concorde is, of course, just magnificent up close, and there was evidence that pre-COVID you could have actually boarded her, but access was closed during my visit. Well, that just about does it for this brief tour of the Intrepid Air and Space Museum in Manhattan. A must-see for any aviation enthusiast. Please do visit. You won't regret it. March W13 out.